Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm here with Jay and Tim. What's up, gentlemen?
Hello. It's the first Tim.
The first Tim?
Should clarify, yeah.
Tim number one?
Not here, but yeah, Legion Sphere.
What makes you the first Tim?
America.
I played Legion before Timbo did, so there you go.
Okay.
I think you were
American
born
Tim.
before him too. I think also you're in America, so that makes you number one as well. So
There
Insert eagle screeching.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually is not a very inspiring sound because it's the one that they usually use for movies and stuff is in fact not an eagle.
No. The eagle screech is actually like horrific.
Yeah. It's pretty
I no offense to you or Mike Dash's Barry, but I have been enjoying that you two are back in the rotation because when it was Lucas and Tim, I just found that I felt really, really old because they're both very young.
Yeah.
And so like pretty much maybe young enough to be our kids potentially, like if we had kids when we were like 18. So like yeah, like so I was starting to feel out of touch a little bit there with those two rotating all the time. So
I gotcha. Early middle age riding
Yeah.
into victory. Hooray. Yeah.
Yeah. So you and Dash coming on is nice.
Hooray. No existential dread here, kids. Yay.
Well, like it would be like before every podcast, like Tim, especially Tim, but sometimes Lucas too, they'd be talking about all this crazy stuff they're doing, and I'm like, dude, I'm angry we're even up this late right now recording this podcast, let alone doing something after this. Like
Right. Yeah, talking about like 2-3 a.m. escapades, and it's like if I'm up at 2 a.m., something has gone terribly wrong.
Yes, that's right. It's actually because I woke up again after falling asleep at like 8:30. I'm now up at 2 because I made a mistake and went to bed too early.
Yeah. I got up for some water and then went back to bed. There you go.
Right. Yeah. Or, someone's breaking into your house, a child was crying.
Yeah.
Let him break in, let him cry. It's fine. If I'm sleeping, I'm sleeping.
Dude, you know what's something crazy? So for the first time in a long time, like maybe like 15, 20 years, last night I woke up at 3 a.m. starving. Like, go down to the kitchen. I have to eat right now or I'm going to die, like hungry. And I haven't done that in like 50. I honestly can't remember the last time that's happened to me. And so I was like, oh, because you always hear those things about people waking up in the middle of the night to go get a snack or something like that. That's not my normal like life. But last night, I don't know what it was. I was just like, dude, I'm starving.
It happens to me
I
all
feel
the
that.
time. So
Yeah. If I don't eat something small before bed, like nothing huge, but like just something like again, just something simple, I'm gonna wake up in the middle of the night and be starving to death and be upset about it. Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah, I don't know. That's not my life usually. So that was really weird for me last night. But then it also like I don't know how you guys are, but I went downstairs, I got something to eat, and then my mind just started racing, like because now I'm up and my body and mind were like,
yeah.
all right, let's friggin' rock and roll. And I was like, whoa, no, you woke me up, man. Like I didn't want to do this. Yeah, and so then I was up for a while. I had to like sit on the couch so I didn't bother Rachel, and like I turned on the TV. I was like, I don't know, this is where I'm at now.
The final step in that aging journey is when you start like banging around pots and pans at 4 o'clock in the morning and just assuming everyone else is going to wake up at the same time as you,
Mhm.
and it's fine.
Yep.
Just totally negligent of
Okay.
anybody else in the house. Just
Yep.
do your
Yeah,
thing.
not intentionally trying to wake people up, just being like, it's
Yeah.
early enough to be up. Like, why
Yeah.
do I need to
Right.
bother being quiet? You know?
I should
Yeah.
do the dishes right now. You're right.
Yeah. I should grind coffee as loudly as possible.
Dude,
4:30.
it's so funny. So Kyle, you'll get there. We have 3, almost 4 full grown teenagers, and sometimes, like, you wake up or I won't even be asleep maybe, but like, we go to bed early, but I'm usually up to like midnight or something, but like
Mhm.
I'll go down at like midnight or 12:30, like go to the bathroom right before I go to sleep or something. There's literally one of my sons having like just a full Thanksgiving feast, like at the table, like made himself an entire dinner for 4, but it's just him eating it, and I'm just going, what the hell are you doing? I'm starving. I'm like, you ate 2 dinners. I saw you eat both those dinners. I know. I can't stop. And he's just like, wow, wow. And they're all like I mean, Kyle, they're all like you. They're all very tall and like
Mhm.
hyper skinny, and just like these like metabolism freaks that are just keep on, like, just nothing stops them. They're just like,
The worst.
dude,
The
it's
worst.
wild.
Some of us have to actually wear what we eat.
Dude.
Like, carry it around with us.
Yeah, like I'm at that age where I have to think about everything I eat. Like
Yeah.
everything I think about eating, I have to think twice about it just to make sure that, like. Anyways, that's probably why I'm hungry. I don't know if you guys have
Yeah.
gotten to
This food episode brought to you
I was
by
I was just gonna say, Fifth Trooper brought to you by Fruit Snacks.
I've been working on dieting the last like 3 months, so like yeah, that's probably why everything's about food right now. Like, I'm just so hungry.
Yeah.
Anyways. Yep. So what were we talking about today?
I was gonna
I
let
don't
you do it
remember.
because I always do the segue thing, and I'm gonna let you got this. You got this. It's all you.
Talking
It's
about
fine.
practice. We're gonna talk about practice.
Practice.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, this doesn't have to just be tournament practice. It could be practice
True.
generally, but we're probably going to
Yes.
frame it. This is a 101 episode in our schedule, so we're probably going to frame it in the context of at least like event practice. It could be just like
Well, what are you practicing for?
Well,
You
that's
gotta
why I
be
say
practicing for something.
event
Yeah.
practice. Yeah. So you
Okay,
need, like,
okay.
even if it's like a local store,
Yeah.
Sure.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's got to be something, because
Yeah,
otherwise,
yeah,
what are you
yeah.
doing?
Right.
Sure. But
Because
I
otherwise, it's just playing.
yeah, but both Jay and I are wearing our Adepticon shirts, which was not
Yeah.
intentional.
This was one of my Adepticon shirts that I wore there. So like,
There you go.
For those of
counts.
you
Makes
who
sense.
don't know, Adepticon is by far the best minis convention in the world. Period.
that's fair.
And here's my quick reason
agree.
why.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
and I think this shows in the numbers, right? So like we just saw Gen Con, and they didn't have as great of numbers as we've seen at
For the
like
tournaments,
other
yeah.
tournaments, right?
Yep.
And here's why. There's so much to do at Gen Con. Like, Tim, like there's just a billion things to do. And so when you're at a tournament at Gen Con, you absolutely not only feel like you're missing out, but you are missing out, right? And
I literally missed out on an event that I now regret missing out on.
Yeah. And so Adepticon, though there's a bunch of stuff going on, they've got it very well structured so that you're going for the tournament, and all the other stuff is just kind of gravy on top of the tournament, which is great. So yeah, by far the best minis tournament ever.
It's funny because like Adepticon, so having gone to both, and I'm a big Gen Con fan. Like Gen Con, you could have a whole day where you have nothing scheduled and just spend the whole day in the vendor hall and still run out of time.
Yep.
And still not have enough time. Whereas Adepticon, it's very minis focused, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on, but you have to have it scheduled.
Yep.
Like you have to have a schedule, otherwise, like
you
that
can't
vendor
just like
hall.
wander around and
Yeah,
Yeah.
like there's a couple of vendors, like it's fine, but you're gonna walk through it in like an hour and then be good, if that.
Which is great, because it's
yeah.
just a different focus, right? It's just a
Oh, yeah.
different way of looking at an event, which is amazing. So
I did a painting class when I was at last Adepticon
Oh,
because I
nice.
wasn't winning at Legion, so I did something else, and it was great. It was super handy.
I think that's
Yeah.
the second thing I'm the most excited about. This is getting into practice, I swear to God, Kyle. But that's the second thing I think I'm most excited about this upcoming Adepticon is, so for those of you who don't know or haven't heard yet, my plan is to play in Worlds. I want to go play, compete, and try to make it somewhere, right? I don't have, I mean, a mission yet. Top 4 would be wonderful at Worlds for me. But my second thing is I'm looking forward to being able to schedule time to go to like some airbrushing classes or go to some of those painting classes. Like I really want to do that. So
I took an airbrushing class at Nova Open a few years ago, and it just like totally changed my perspective on how to do it in a
I'm
way that has been very beneficial to me. So
As a side note, I'm not saying that you should go to at least one of the painting classes at the end of the con, but I might now have a whole lot of extra paint that I didn't show up with at the con. That maybe
Interesting.
they were, maybe they had some extra pots laying
Yeah.
around. They were like, it happens, you
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm like, all right. So, and I know for a fact that that's not the only time that's happened at a major event. Because there was one time, I forget what it was, it might have been PAX or Nova. Someone came up to me and they just said, "Tim, you want some paint?" in the shadiest way possible. And then they just opened up their
like they're
backpack.
trying to sell you some like kind of
Yeah.
illicit.
I
Yeah.
was like, what do you mean? Like, no, look. And they opened up their backpack and it was just full of these, like, some of them unopened, but some of them like half used, like just pots of paint. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Like you have hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise here. Did you steal this? It's like, no, they just gave it to me. I was like, all
Yeah.
right, well, fair
Opens a
enough.
trench coat. Hey Tim, you want some paint?
Yeah. You want that
Hmm.
flesh tearers red? I got you. I know what you like, Tim. Here you go. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. So talking about practice, we're gonna basically talk about. We've talked about like experimentation on other episodes, so we're not going to talk as much about that. This is like I have something that I think that I want to, a general list concept that I want to do, and I want to play games in a way that most benefits practicing with that list just to get reps and to learn it better, but also making smaller tweaks around the edges to it to improve it over time.
Yeah.
With some kind of event in mind. So
yeah.
How do you guys approach that? Tim, this is your topic idea, so why don't I let you
No, that's fair.
let
That's
you
fair.
lead.
So I just to give some background of why I mentioned it. So for Gen Con, Legion is a bit of a background event for me for Gen Con. Anywhere else I go, Legion's #1, but there's so many other things to do. But anyway, so kind of because of that, I was like, I can't decide what to take. So I said, let me take the quote unquote safe list and bring Blizzard. I only played Blizzard once when it first came out, and then that was it. Never played it again. So I got the whole box, painted everything, whole 9 yards. And I will tell you now, the list was solid enough. It was 11 act Veers, Blizzard with 4 bikes, of course, and then a whole bunch of like loaded snows with officers and impact grenades, all that good stuff. 11 acts. I was pretty happy with it. Little tweaks I would do with it, but both games that I lost. So I went 1 and 2. Spoiler alert. I went 1 and 2. Both games I lost, I can tell you exactly what happened. One of them, I had some really bad dice, but I cannot sit here and be like, I lost because of my dice. Like they were statistically very low and abnormal, but that's not what did it. That made me concede by turn 3, but I the mistakes I made, I chose wrong deployment. And again, we can get into this and like how you think about all this, but I chose either wrong deployment, turn 0 mistakes, or even after turn 0, if you can't control that, like aggressive with one unit and not aggressive enough with the other ones and things like that. And just all things that I know, me as a player, I know I would not have done that had I just had more practice with that kind of list. They were, a couple of them were boneheaded mistakes. Like, I know better than that. I just didn't think about it. And that's the thing is like, especially when you're at a major event, a 3-round event, or especially a 4-round event, the more games you play, the more you're going to lose focus, the more you're going to make mistakes, you're going to get sloppy. And so when you have those practice games in there, you're able to really lessen that, because the core basics of your list and what you're doing is so ingrained into you that you're able to focus on like the higher processes, if you will, of trying to figure out, okay, the strategy, and trying to
Mhm.
outthink your opponent, instead of just the base level of, how do I play this? Like, how does this list work? What am I doing? And it's important.
Yeah, so I just played our own Technophobia recently. And one of the things I did was I played I know for everyone listening, last week I said I had no desire to play Tempest. But I've been trying it, just not like, and I think when I said no desire, I think I meant more for like we've got an event coming up this Saturday that Tim and I and Evan hopefully are all going to. And like I'm not going to play Tempest there. I don't have a desire to take it to like a local tournament, but I do want to practice with it and just get a feel for it. But I'll tell you one thing. So when I played Lucas, it was my third time playing a variation of this list. I had made some tweaks getting there. But then the thing I did against Lucas, because we decided, hey, this is going to be a friendly game to just kind of see what's possible, you know, with these two lists. And I definitely did some things that I normally, if I was really being competitive, would not have done, just to see how the list could hold up if I did them. And so, particularly, what I did was I scouted. I was playing two ATSTs, two bikes, five of the scouts, and one stormtrooper with a repair droid. And I usually, and it was KP, I probably would have just stayed in my deployment and not done the scouting at all, and just waited for my opponent to try to go towards the KP, because it was just in a very advantageous place for me. But I wanted to see how the list could hold up if I did scout. And so, I like doing that. I like playing the list and doing things I know are bad or I think are bad, and just seeing how the list holds up when I do it. And you know what I mean? Just to test out its weaknesses, and like, all right, I know this is a weakness, but how bad is the weakness?
Yeah, it's useful to kind of put yourself and your list in uncomfortable situations, particularly if you have a quote unquote red player list or like a no bid list,
Yeah.
because you might be in a lot of situations where you don't get to use your deck. And part of that, part of playing one of those lists in the first place is making one that like doesn't really care about the
Hmm.
battle cards that much, which you can definitely do.
Yep.
But the other thing too is like, even if you make a list that, maybe 9 or 10 of the 12 battle cards are just perfectly fine for you, there's still going to be a handful of combinations that you just really probably don't want,
Yeah.
particularly in like certain matchups. Um, for example, at Lone Star Open, and this is something that I wish I had been able to practice, but it was literally like the day after Ewoks came out. Um, and I faced an Ewok list, and it was one of those things where I had built a close to 800, I think it was like 799, but effectively a no bid list. And I was like, all right, I don't really care about the battle cards in most of my matchups based on how I've designed this list. And then I run up against an Ewok list, and of course he has his deck, which includes limited viz.
Yeah.
And there was one other one in there too that I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but that I like really didn't like. And in order to avoid lim viz, which would have been super bad for me, I had to end up like on some others, basically some suboptimal deployment choices based on how the terrain happened to be laid out on the table. Um, and like if I had just practiced against that list, I think I might have, in hindsight, settled for lim viz over the deployment that we ended up on. Just because like you're not taking a lot of range 4+ shots with. I was playing Anakin Republic list. You're not taking a lot of like range 4 shots or even range 3 shots on turn 1 anyway, typically, unless you start like super close. And that list likes to live at range 3. So if you're not taking like range 3 shots on turn 1 and you have those available on turn 2, then even against an aggro melee list like Ewoks, it probably doesn't really affect you as much as you think it might. So I wish that I had, done that specific. Like, I would never choose to play Limviz with a list like mine, but knowing in hindsight, obviously now having done that, that it might not have been that bad. I wish I had been like, all right, Limviz against an Eoic list would be an uncomfortable position for me. Let's try it just to see if it's really as bad as I think it is. So
Yeah,
and
and I
sometimes the
think
answer is no.
yeah, absolutely right. And which is what's also, I mean, that goes back to the practice thing. That's why you practice it, right? Get those reps in. And I think going back a little bit to what Jay kind of mentioned, I think it also depends on what are you trying to do with this practice. Are you saying, and I don't think in this kind of setting, I don't know if there is a right or wrong answer, but you just have to answer it yourself of, am I playing this list? Well, first off, am I just playing this list to play a game of Legion? That's a different thing. We're not talking about that. But to say like, okay, what are you trying to achieve with this list and with this practice? Are you saying this is what I want to bring and I want to change some of my upgrades around, figure out if I have the most like effective upgrades? Are you willing to say, okay, some of these units, like I want this one unit, but the rest can be changed around or something like that? Or are you saying I'm trying to figure out what the best battle cards are? Like there's a whole spectrum of what you could try to achieve with the practice. And I think it's important to narrow down. Or is it a new unit that you're just trying to learn how that works, which is totally fair. Like when Asajj came out, I played an Asajj versus Asajj AAT versus Asajj AAT list. Kind of a boring game, but we were both learning how to play Asajj.
Yep.
And so we both did things. And we narrated this, we talked it out. We said, like you mentioned, Jay, like, hey, I'm doing this, and I would not do this if this was a tournament. Like I understand that she's probably gonna die if I do this.
Yep.
But I want to try. I want to see what happens. And like, hey, she'll do better than I thought, things like that. Like trying to figure out what your goal is for practice, because I think in practice, like winning shouldn't be your only goal. Like you might learn more from a loss than from a win in those cases.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, what Lucas and I did, where it was more of a true practice game where it was like, hey, let's talk, like, okay, this is what I'm thinking about doing, and this is why I'm thinking about doing it. I know it's wrong, but I just want to see what'll happen. Because I think a lot of times I've found is I've learned a lot more in my losses than I have in my wins. And so I like to put myself in position, especially when nothing's on the line and it's just my ego and my pride. I like to put more on the line to like put myself in precarious positions, because I know I'll learn something from that I wouldn't have otherwise if I had done it, in a safe way or in a better way.
Yeah. And I think what you do after a loss is probably some of the most important strategic time in Legion in my mind. Like you can use that time to be upset, or you can use that time to go over. And like what I like to do, win or lose, but especially after a loss, is I don't like to touch anything. Like I just like to look, just stare. Because then you're not on a clock, you're not wasting time, you're just burning through like a Rolodex, like rolling through like what could I have done? I could have done this, could have done that, blah, 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 like, and playing it all, narrate it with your opponent if they're willing to talk through that, if they're willing to have that conversation, like just figure out like what could I have done differently. I think this also goes to, and this is where I struggle. I'm preaching to the choir, but this choir is deaf sometimes. But but that's where sticking with one list is really beneficial, because if you learn all these lessons for a list and then you switch lists, you might have to be like, you might kind of be hitting the reset button there a little bit. Which again, I do that all the time. It's my own fault, but you can be really learning a lot through some of those losses if you just stand there and look at what did you do wrong. Like first off, always admit like you're not perfect. I'm sure even if you win, you've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. What could you have done better?
Yeah, and don't go to the dice, because that's not a helpful.
No, that's
It's
never
not helpful
rewarding.
for improvement, right?
No,
Um,
it's never. You're never going to be. The only thing I could say is maybe you could have put yourself in a situation where you weren't depending on dice as much, but that's different than
Yeah.
blaming the dice.
Yeah, like
right. Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes I'll tell you that, this game, well, granted, Lucas had a lot of critical in his list. He was playing Callus, Boba, Bosk, with Shores and snipers. So he had a lot of critical in his list, But like there was a bunch of rolls where he would roll like 3 natural crits plus a surge. I'm just like, dude. And so, I think like looking at that too, going, well, literally, I did the right thing here. He was just rolling hot, and there's no lesson to be learned by that. It is just something that happened, and I needed to just move on. And like I was real, like the first one, I was like, oh wow, that's a good shot. But by like the third one, I was like, all right, man, like, come on. Like this is getting a little but it's nothing I did or didn't do. It was just how his dice were rolling, and it was just crazy.
I was gonna say, even in that situation, because I had a game like that not that long ago, actually, where I was like, I think I said it in the group chat or something. I was like, I don't know what I could have done differently, which is if it is a little bit frustrating, but also I think even in that moment, even if that happens and you still lose, use that to maybe shore up or reassure yourself, saying like, okay, I made the right tactical decision. It just didn't work out for me this time, but at least like replay it, always replay it. Did you actually make the right call? Because you might be, biased, trying to make yourself feel better. Like maybe you didn't, but even if you did, even if you did it all right and it just didn't shake out for you, the lesson to be learned there is focus on not the dice, but focus on, okay, I did this good. I did this well. This worked out well. Okay, cool, cool, cool.
Yeah, here are the things I did well.
Yep.
And it's totally cool too to ask your opponent, be like, look,
Yeah.
What do you think I could have done? And clearly,
Yeah.
I think that's okay, even in like a tournament setting. Clearly we're talking first and foremost here about practicing for a tournament, but I think even in a tournament game where you lose, it's totally fine if you have time in between, like when you're having this conversation in the next match to be like, hey, that was a great game. Thanks. I learned a lot. What are some things you think I could have done better? That's like a great conversation to have with your opponent after the game.
Yeah.
And also like even just in practice games, I think it's good to kind of self-narrate and have that conversation like in real time too as the game is going on, being like, look, here's what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? Like especially if you have like an experienced practice partner that you practice with a lot and you're good at like vibing off of each other. You can cover a lot of ground just like within game theory crafting.
Yeah.
Be like, okay, I'm gonna go here, and then you're probably gonna do this, and then this is gonna happen. What if I do this instead? Kind of a thing. And you can kind of like walk through all the possible decision trees relatively quickly if you have an experienced opponent that you're comfortable with. And then maybe you take the one where it's like, okay, we've decided here's clearly what's going to happen if I do option A or option B. But we kind of don't know what's going to happen if I do option C. So let's do that one, because neither of us know what's going to happen there, and let's see what happens. I've definitely done that in practice games where it's been like, okay, the obvious thing to do is option A. The obvious thing to not do is option B. So let's see option C and see how that works out. So, it's okay and it's okay to like walk stuff back to in practice games as well, and be like, wow, I totally biffed that roll. That was like a 1 in 1,000 situation. Let's just, let's pretend that didn't happen and keep going for purposes of the value of this game, basically.
Sure. Well, and I think for some reason Bosca's sticking in my head. I don't know why, but he's just certain games I've played with him. I feel like, especially with scale and especially before the scale changes, with old scale especially, I felt like there was a lot of games, practice games at least, where I had multiple options of like, how do I want to move him? Where should I move him? What should I do with him? And again, this doesn't have to be boss, could be anybody, but trying to figure out and narrate and trying to remember in your head like these key moments. So even after the fact, after the game's done, or if you want to do it mid game, whatever, say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm moving him here. Or hey, do you remember on turn 4 when I did this? If I had moved him to the left, or if I had gone this way, if I had gone this flank, what would you have done? Like how would you have responded? So that way like the other side of it and how the other players would respond to that kind of action. Because that's also important too, as part of practice, is practicing other people's reactions to your actions.
Yeah, I think with that, like one of the things I'm gonna be trying here with this tournament that we've got coming up, like there's a bunch coming up that and like different games I'm gonna have a chance to play is in that same vein, my goal is to actually play other lists that are that I know are good or I think could be good, just to understand them better so that when I go back to my list, like I know, oh yeah, I know what's coming next. You know what I mean? Because I've played this list. Like, yeah, I know what Yoda's about to do. Stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that is one of my biggest. I hate playing against rebels, and I don't own any rebels. It's the only faction I don't own, and so there's definitely times when someone will play a card, especially like a commander who maybe is not as popular or something like that, a command card that's not super common. I have to go like, all right, what does that do again? Like what you gotta remind me here, man, because I don't remember what it does. And so it is a little frustrating when you don't play a faction to not know how they operate. It'd be
Yeah.
like, I'm sure you can do something here. Cool.
Yeah, it's helpful even if you just do a game or two with something that you're not familiar with. And I've found too, like sometimes, particularly if you're playing with the same people over and over again, you can get stuck in a rut where your friends can get kind of stuck in a rut. And
Yeah.
the best thing to do, one of the best things to do in that situation is just literally switch lists with them. Recognize that what you're doing is, particularly if you're practicing for a tournament, you should kind of view that as like a team environment. And what you're doing is a collaborative exercise and be like, look, how can we all make each other better? And sometimes the answer
Right.
is like, I'm having a really hard time right now with Rebels.
Yeah.
And your friend plays Empire or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, why don't you take a couple games and I'll play Empire and you play Rebels and I'll see,
Yep.
maybe you can figure some stuff out with the Rebels that I haven't seen, or maybe I can do
Sure.
the opposite with Empire, and we can learn from each other's experiences that way. And
Yeah.
it's good to have like kind of a team that you can practice with, and particularly like it doesn't even have to be like all these players are going to an event. It could just be like a local group of guys, and some of them are going and some of them aren't, but the ones that aren't going still want to like help the guys that are going do well.
Right.
um we've got a community like that here in Northern Virginia, and before Worlds, Mike and I were the basically the two that were going, and the other guys locally, they were like, hey, let's get together for some practice. You tell us what lists you want us to play, and we'll run a few games, and basically like we're here for you guys to get the reps that you need to get. So like, what can we do?
Yeah.
um and it's great if you can find like a team environment like that, and obviously the easiest place to start is your local players. Don't view those local players as adversaries. View them as like, at least in terms of the practice setting, view them as
Yeah.
teammates, basically, just like you would for like a sport or
Yep.
something
Yeah.
like that. So
Well, and like I've had locals before who maybe aren't being able to, travel to an event or go to an event or something like that, and they know I am. They'll ask me, which I always appreciate them being willing to do this, and it's not mandatory by any means, but it's always nice to have this option for them to offer like, hey, what do you want to play against, or what do you need to play against, what do you need to face? And I can be like, well, I really haven't had any practice against this kind of list or this kind of list. Could you bring something along those lines? And I don't think I've ever really told anyone like to bring an exact kind of list, but just like a general
yeah.
theme of I need force users, I need armor, or trooper heavy, whatever. Uh, and that's always helpful too.
Yeah, and to that point too, like I brought this up on we did a whole thing on Legion 99 this week too, so if you haven't had a chance, check that out. But I brought up too, like the reason, even though we were talking about, hey, if you already have an invite, do you still go to like store championships? And my answer was yes, because I still need practice for Worlds, and I don't know how else to get that, because my example was like Evan and I and another friend of ours, we play all the time, but I know all their tells and I know how they play. Like, so it doesn't matter what list Evan brings. I know Evan's play style. So I'm playing to Evan, not to the list, or you
Yep.
know what I mean? I'm playing the player, not the game. And so I think that being able to go play other people, go places, do that sort of thing, to get different styles, different people's takes on the game, is really good. And because I still believe, listen, we pontificate about all kinds of different, what we think is good and what we think is the best lists out there, right? But there's always going to be somebody that's going to pop up with somebody, and I always use Lupo as a perfect example with Sabs, right? Like, none of us saw that coming, and like he just popped up with Sabs and started smashing face at LVO, right? And so like, um I think that's a perfect example of how that can happen. And there's been other things. Evan Vader Lat, right? Like at Adepticon a couple of years ago. Like, no one saw that one coming, and he was smashing face with that. Like, so being able to get out there and see what people have in their crazy heads, and like they're putting on the table, just in case they do something that's interesting or new that you've never seen, so that the next time in a more like critical position, you can go, okay, here's the options I know of. Here's some of the ones I just recently learned that they could do. How am I going to be prepared for all this,
Yeah, and I think too, just while we're on this topic, I think it should be pointed out too that when we're talking about tailoring lists, I always struggle with that. Tailoring lists, it's also looking at turn 0 and looking at your battle cards and making sure that those fit your list. So your list could be perfectly kitted out. You could have every unit the way you want it, every upgrade the way you need it. Great, great, great. But practicing turn 0 and making sure that you have the right battle cards, especially now that for a tournament setting, battle cards are legal information and open information. So your opponent, even if you don't have a bid, even if you're at 800, you still need to be careful about your battle deck, because if you're not, and you accidentally put in something that's not beneficial for you, your opponent might catch that and say, "Hey, I'm going to play that instead." It's rare that would happen, but you never know. And so you really do need to be careful with that. And of course, if you have a bid, then you want to be extra careful. But understanding that, like, not every list is going to be good at every single objective, and that's okay. But making sure you figure out two things really: a, what you want to play. So like imagining the flop, quote unquote, for turn 0, and imagining what you want to see happen. But I think maybe even more importantly is, how do you fix a bad flop? How do you come back from a bad flop? So to bring back to Gen Con, my second game, we had, it was versus Maul Cad with I think a Magna, maybe 2 Magnas. I think it's just 1 Magna and some repair bots, some heal bots, and some bots in the back. And we played AP, AP, Intercept, I think Clear, which was not ideal for me, but it was either that or Hostage, and Hostage would have been even worse in that situation for me. But anyway, and so that was me. I mitigated what damage I could in turn 0 because it was his list, it was his battle deck, and I said, okay, this is the best I can do. But then I misplayed my list in that situation. And again, had I practiced not only my list but my list in a situation that wasn't favorable to me, I would have not made the mistake. Just to put again more context, I pushed my snowtroopers up too fast, and then I was too cautious with my bikes. A lot of times people rush their bikes in. I rarely do that. I was too cautious, and by the time the bikes got there, everybody was dead. Yeah, just things like that. Practice a good flop. Practice a bad flop.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the other thing, I do this sometimes. I know, like, I always tell people this when I meet them in real life, because I notice a lot of you out there, when we end up playing in real life, you're like, oh, here we go. Like, yeah, Jay knows all about this game. And frankly, there's so much about this game. Like, I've taken to not even memorizing some of this stuff, because there's just too much for me to like. There's a lot of like Shadow Collective I just don't even bother like in my head. And so like before a tournament or something, I'll take a look at what people have been playing, and if there's something I just don't recognize or haven't had a lot of experience about, I'll just go read the cards and like try to like remind myself about keywords that I haven't seen in a while. Like dauntless stuff like that, like, and just go, oh yeah, that does that. That's right. Whatever the keyword may be, just to like brush up. And I think that's just a good way to like kind of practice. Like because there's guys like you, Kyle and Evan, who just have it all memorized, and like they just know what everything does, and the rules, and everything's just straight in their head. And for me, it's more like, you ever see that SpongeBob commercial where he's just like running around the office in his head burning everything? Like that's
Mhm.
basically every day for me. And so like going to a tournament is hard because I don't have everything memorized, and I have to like just brush up and like give myself a reminder like the night before I go to a tournament, and just and and a lot of times there are rules where I'm just like, yeah, let's just call a judge, because I honestly don't remember the exact wording. I don't read the forums a lot, as much as I probably should, to get all the like minutia, uh, you know, rulings. And so let's just call a judge, because it's just going to be easier here. But just like reading cards, boning up on stuff that is present, like dark troopers. Like I haven't honestly faced a ton of dark troopers. And so knowing that they're kind of the boogeyman right now, besides Tempest, like this week I'll do some reading on the Dark Troopers, and just some kind of like thoughts in my head about how I'm going to approach them with the list that I'm bringing, and what I think the best approach to them is. Stuff like that is easier to do, right, than to go find somebody to play with,
Yeah.
sometimes. So. And listen, I'm not good at that. Just so everyone's clear. This is something I have to force myself to do, because I'm terrible at this too. But I have found it's been helpful to kind of just do like quick. I'll go to, our Legion quick guide, and I'll just go down the alphabet, and I'll look through some of the, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on this keyword again.
That quick guide is so good. It's so helpful. It really
Hey,
is. It's so
that's why
helpful.
we're here.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's so much easier to find stuff.
it
Yeah.
really is. It
Yeah,
really is. And it
Joe's
like,
been doing a great job.
and if it ever comes up, just so everyone knows, if it ever comes up and someone's like, well, it's that, that's not an official guide, it links to the forums and to the rule book. And so you can,
Right.
do your research if you want to. You can check everything if you want to. That's fine. But like, it's all
Well,
straight
yeah,
from the book.
right.
Yeah.
And to be clear, we're just copying it out of the book and like
Right. That's what
It's
I'm
pasting it
saying.
literally
in.
where it's
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
where it's from.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's not like
yeah.
it's not
It's not
someone's
like we're
interpretation.
rewriting anything. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not an interpretive work. It's copy and paste. Yeah.
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 There have
But
been a
it's
couple like
very helpful.
ninja updates, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
people
True.
usually point those out pretty quickly, and they get incorporated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's super helpful.
yeah. Um yeah. I mean, this may seem like something silly, but you can also you can practice for an event. And Jay, this is kind of what you're saying with getting outside your normal play group. Like practicing for an event also includes going to other events, right? Events that you care less about, basically. And just getting reps in at a tournament, particularly if you don't have a lot of tournament experience. Clearly you want to start somewhere, like start with a store tournament. But then if you're going to a convention tournament that you want to be practicing for, try and go to as many local store tournaments as you can before then, in addition to obviously just whatever normal practice games you're doing with your local team. So
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know I wasn't on the round table, Jay,
Mhm.
but I think for me that that one singular point kind of, I don't have as strong a position about this as I think probably some people on the panel discussion would have, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever fair to like deny people practice at an event.
Yeah.
And I think it's totally acceptable if you have an invite to just keep going to tournaments, because like you need those games. It's okay
Yeah.
to be getting reps in a competitive setting like that.
Yeah.
So
And I think there's definitely I think the problem is when you have a conversation like that with our team, which it was all Fifth Trooper,
Yeah.
is that we're also content creators. So there's also a portion of the team that is looking out for the community. So like a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that was coming up in the argument was, what if I took a spot from somebody who didn't have an invite that's the only tournament they're going to make it to? Or what if what if I crush somebody and I crush their spirits and they don't want to play Legion anymore? Like, and these are the things, these are all great questions, in my head. But I think my answer to it was, number one, I don't feel like I'm good enough at the game right now where like I have that concern that I'm going to go in and crush somebody and make them feel bad. Because like my argument was, even when I'm beating someone, I'm still like, even at this last tournament, I didn't have a world's invite. We're at a store championship and I was still helping my opponents, going, nah, take that back. Don't do that. Like, you know what I mean? That was clearly not what you wanted to do. So just take it back. Like I'm still helping and like I'm not like being like mega competitive, Chad, and like just like crushing everyone and their spirits. But yeah, I think it's a question, I think it's not only a question for you as a person with an invite, if you feel like you're a good player, but I think it's also a question for the other players that are going to a store championship in particular, because it's like that is the way it's set up right now, is that you get an invite to Worlds. So your next potential experience in this like competitive atmosphere is going to be Worlds,
The World Championships,
which is legit, right? Like there's people from all over the world coming to crush souls. And so like part of me is like, I don't know. I mean, maybe you need to have the challenge of like, I'm a mid-level player. I'm not a top tier. I'm hoping to get there by Adepticon, but like I'm a mid-level player. And so if you're struggling against me, or if I absolutely crush you, you probably weren't going to have a great time at Worlds, is my view on it.
I think that's debatable, but that's a debate we've had
I was
previously on
saying,
the show.
that's
already,
very debatable,
so.
but it's a good thing to debate and to think about personally.
Which part's debatable? You guys think
What,
I'm a poor player? Is that...
No, I think it's I think you imposing the whether or not someone's going to have a good time at Worlds on someone
I was
else.
gonna say, you could go to Worlds, lose
Yeah.
all your games, and still have a great time.
Right.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't know everyone, and I don't know their personalities. Maybe it's the dad in me that's just worried about the kids, being so excited, like to go, like,
it's because Jay cares about you, everyone.
Think that they can
he
sing
cares.
and they can't actually sing, but they go try out for America's Got Talent or something, and then
But maybe they have a damn good time doing it anyway.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, exactly. That's
I know. You're right. It's, you know what? I'm gonna let it go,
and then
I'm gonna go to all these store championships, and I'm gonna beat anybody who gets in my way, and whatever.
There you
I
go.
think you could take it to where
Jay the Merciless.
Yeah.
this is a really expensive way to practice.
The relentless.
There you go.
You could look at it as if that does happen, let's argue you're crushing your local scene, you get a Worlds invite, you go to Worlds, and then, oh wow, you go, 0-4, and I think you still get to have like the secondary bracket. So let's just say you go, God forbid, like 0-6, whatever, no wins. You can still take everything you learned, and hopefully with those losses, you learned a ton. Take that back to your local community, grow your community, make it stronger, and that way, come next year, if you get an invite again next year, you're well prepared. And then maybe there's more people in your community that are now traveling, getting invites, and like, so you choose what you do with your losses. You choose how to handle that.
Yeah. Yes, but my concern is not, I think where my concern comes from is I've definitely seen like folks who just go to tournaments because they're going to have fun, and they go in and they're like, yeah, I'm going 0-3. It's fine. Like, I'm just here to have a great time. But then there's I've definitely seen folks who are going in like what in their mind hyper competitive, and then you're like, I'm sorry, man. And then you like beat them, and you're
Yeah,
like, and then they just like it just like tears them apart, and you're just
I,
like, dude, I'm so sorry.
I
You
get what
know?
Now,
you're saying.
Yeah,
There's
I
where you're
do.
like, yeah, that's the thing that happens.
yeah,
But I guess it's not like your job to uh worry about that, I guess.
Yep, exactly.
I mean,
And not only that, I'm going to speak.
we're all adults, right?
Yeah.
well, some of these guys are getting young. I don't. They're like,
Yeah, I guess we just got done talking about how
yeah,
some of these players could be our
yeah,
kids, right?
yeah. Well, that's.
Well,
I mean,
no,
that's a lot of it, right? There's some young kids, and I'm just like,
sure.
and I like the community, and I want people to have a good time. It's a very and I think the rest of the staff on the round table felt the same way, right? Where it's a very mixed bag because it's like we want to build the community, we want to promote the community, we want to encourage people in the community to play, but we also need to practice.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's this weird like
Well,
ugh.
and I'll say, as someone, you make a good example of the person who's hyper competitive and then still loses anyway. Because hi, that's me. That's me. And I will tell you right now, and anybody who's played me can probably attest to this. I get real salty for probably about 5 minutes after I lose. But that's why I stand there and just look at the table. Let me have my moment. I might walk away and like get pissed off for a minute, and then I'll come back and be like, all right, what are the lessons we learned here? So you can do both. You can be hyper competitive, lose, and still learn. It's okay.
Yep. You learn. I mean, I learn a lot more from losses than I do from wins.
Yeah.
Personally. And we've talked about learning from losses on this podcast before.
Yeah.
But
I feel like at some point I need to start demonstrating my learning. I need to pass the exam because I've been studying for the exam for a long time. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Trying to think
yeah, and
how else you could practice. Go ahead, Cal. Sorry.
well, I mean, I'm just sort of expounding on the like whole it's a mixed bag, you get all kinds kind of a thing. I personally, I love this community, the Legion community, and specifically the Legion competitive community. It's so much more like clearly there are outliers. But the fact that those are outliers, I think is testament to how like good and generally like reasonable the Legion competitive community is compared to some other miniatures gaming communities that I shall not name. But like generally speaking, like people are respectful, people are reasonable. You get people that are salty. You get some like crazy tryhards that try and play gotcha. But like generally, in my experience, those are the people that are kind of like not the
Yeah.
there's a pretty tight knit like core competitive community for Legion, and those tend to be the people that are outside that. Let's put it that way. So yeah,
I'm good after you got to give me a couple minutes and then I'm good.
Right.
I gotta,
yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. That's the one thing that I've noticed and appreciate about the Legion community relative to like other competitive miniatures gaming communities is that it is a very generally respectful, reasonable group of players that realize that like at the end of the day, this is a game we're playing. Yes, it is a game that involves skill and luck, and there are winners and losers, but it's still a game. It's based upon essentially like a social contract.
Yep.
And everybody's there to push, little plastic stormtroopers around on a table. So,
yeah,
I don't know. I appreciate you, Legion community. That's what I'm trying to say. You guys are great.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm not gonna bring it up. No, I will. Because this just kind of stuck in my head. I don't think we need to go. I think we've talked about it before, but I'd like to bring it up again. So, because this was, it struck me and I think this goes along with practice and going to these tournaments and all this stuff.
Yep.
But when Tim said, when he said he got mad and had to walk away and come back. So my question is both on the happy side and on the mad side of this spectrum. For those of the people going to a tournament for the first time, or maybe, or maybe have stayed mostly local and they're going to go to a big event, what do we think is an appropriate amount of motions on either side of that spectrum that can, where's the line, do you guys think, as far as, I'll start with
Oh, yeah,
celebratory.
Hmm.
So where are we
yeah.
on the line of celebratory, and how far, where can we go?
So it's a good
Spicy.
question. It's a good
Yeah.
question. No, it is a good question. I know for me, I quite frankly, I don't really care if my opponent celebrates all the time. Like it's fine. I'm so in my own head that there's nothing you can really say or do to me because like any anger I have is about me. It's not about my opponent. So like celebrate however you want, but within reason. Like there's a certain level that it's not about Legion anymore where I'm just like, all right, like let's chill out just in general. I don't care about the game, but like now my anxiety is kicking in. Like now I just feel conscious about like you're drawing a lot of attention to us, and I'm just not comfortable with that. But again, that's not about the game. But as far like in game goes, like you do you, man. You do
Yeah.
you.
I think it's okay to have like sort of spontaneous, quick, brief moments of like reasonable celebration. Like if you have a tight dice roll and you know it goes your way unexpectedly or whatever, and it's like really important. I think it's fine to, say, just have something, do a little tiny little whoop or something like, woo, like I don't know. But
Woo.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I'd say like you want to like put a lid on it pretty quickly. Don't do like a touchdown dance, right? Like next to your table. Yeah, like this is a
Yeah,
it's a minis gaming community.
yeah,
This is not professional sports. Um, so yeah, I think like spontaneous, brief emotions are fine. I think you want to try and like get it back to even keel
yeah.
relatively quickly.
That's fair.
And I think that's goes on both, both for disappointment and excitement.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
it's okay to be disappointed or get upset at like a bad roll or some other thing. Um, I have been known to curse on stream.
Yep.
I remember.
I would be in that boat, so I feel that. It's okay. I feel that.
But it's like immediately after that, you gotta like be like, all right, let's move on. We're moving on.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I know
uh,
for me on the negative side, like when I'm so again, first off, I'm never mad at my opponent. I can
yeah,
think
yeah.
of maybe one time in my
You should
life
never
where I was
direct.
ever.
You should never
Yeah,
direct anger or
that's a
anything
big
like
no
that
no. Like
at your opponent.
that's
Yeah,
absolutely never.
yeah.
Again, I can think of maybe one time, and that's when like he's really being antagonistic. But that said, I know for me, I get really mad at myself because I like again, I
Mm,
know better, and I know, and especially someone who talks about this all the time, right? Like I eat, sleep, and breathe Legion. I should be better at it, and so I get really frustrated with myself at it. Uh, and I think of again Gen Con. Think of my last game against Brian. It was an absolute gentleman. You want to talk about good etiquette? Like A, super friendly dude. B, brought because he was a local indie, brought a like foam standing mat for his opponents to stand on
wow.
and for himself. So he had like a backpack, like a like yoga mat backpack with two standing mats. So it was super nice. I was like, this is
Yeah,
great. As
that's amazing.
you beat my skull in, but you at least gave me something nice to stand on while you did it. It was very,
Yeah.
very kind of you. Uh, but like at the end of that game, I was very upset at myself, and I even told him. And again, especially when someone's so nice and friendly, I say, "Hey, you played excellent. You played perfect. Great. I'm just pissed that I just did that. Like I know better than that, and I can't believe I did that." And so like I like to narrate it so that we
Yeah.
understand like there's no bad air here. Like you're good. I'm gonna beat myself up about this one for a while, but like you're good. It's okay.
Yeah. My reactions both, like, okay, so I'm like jovial most of the time, but like when things start getting dicey, I just get real quiet. And then I'm like, okay. Like, like I just kind of like, because I
Yeah.
know if I don't tone it down, like I'll definitely say something like, and it won't
Yeah.
even be about my opponent. Like it could just be
Right.
dice, right? It could
Yeah.
just be dicing me, and I'll just be like, of course they effing are. Like, you know what I mean? Like I know I'll
Yeah.
say something crazy, and so I'm just like, yeah, okay. And but yeah, I you know, a lot of times I find myself like at the end of a stressful game, like I'll just be like, whoa. You know, you just like let out that like air that you've been holding for like the last 30 minutes. And you know, and so yeah, I think you can be upset, but in a way that like is understandable. Like you can't not upset at your opponent like for in-game stuff. Like if your opponent makes a good move or there's a dice roll or something that just doesn't go your way, right? You could be upset that you didn't see it or that it happened, and you could be like, F, like dang, I didn't that sucks. And then you just move on.
Yeah.
And then
It's
I
like, well
think
played, man. Well played.
yeah,
Like
and then I
you
think
Yep.
on
play.
the
Good game.
yeah, yeah, right. You're like, oh shit, I did not see that.
Yeah.
You know, and
Okay.
I think that's a good level. And then
Yep.
on the positive side, I think, you know, been like you can be happy like when you win. You know, and like one of the things I always do, and this is a good kind of like thing to do because and I mean it, it's not just like but like sometimes if I like one shot something, you know, I'll just be like, dude, I'm so sorry. Like that,
Yes.
you know what?
I've
I'm sorry.
yep.
That sucks. I
I've
get
done that
it.
before.
I get
Yeah.
it. I mean, I'm happy that it happened, but I understand like why that sucks for you.
I've been
Yeah.
there. I feel your
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you have to be aware of how your opponent's feeling, right? Like have some empathy in there.
Yeah.
Of even if something went really well for you, be aware of like, hey, that really sucks for the other person, especially in a one shot scenario, especially if you one shot like a character or something like that. Like that
Yeah.
feels good to do it, but also you feel a little bit bad. Like, okay, like
And I think
ugh.
generally that reinforces that the best thing to do on both sides of the coin, whether it's you or your opponent, is to just like not dwell on it. Like
Yeah.
keep the game moving. Like
Yeah,
oof, man,
right.
that was rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, let's do this. You know, like because when you dwell on it, that's when it starts to get like
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
if you go back to like the same thing, you know, after the game state has kind of already moved on. You're like, man, if that had only, you know, to like last turn, like, okay, no, just that already happened. You know, you're
Yeah.
working with the game as it currently is. Like you gotta keep moving.
God, what
Um,
I think it was from have you guys seen that Netflix quarterbacks yet? Have you watched that? So they basically follow around Patrick Mahomes, uh uh Kirk Cousins, and the other one doesn't matter because he sucked. But uh they follow around three quarterbacks, like basically from the beginning of the season all the way through the season. They like talk, they show their home lives and you know, all this stuff. And so I mean, I hated it because you know I'm a Bills fan, so like the Chiefs, I just hate them, but
yeah,
it's fine. Anyways, there was I think it was Mahomes said that they live in 10-second intervals, which basically like I only care about these 10 seconds. I can't look at the future and I can't look at the past. It's only this 10 seconds. I need to do whatever's right in this 10 seconds. And I think that is kind of a good way to look at Legion. Like, you know, you're
Yeah.
having a plan overall, but when you're in it, it's
Yeah.
like, all right, okay, I lost that unit. I need to, that's in the past now. Now, what
Yep.
am I going to do? What am I going to do in this
yep,
next 10 seconds or this next
Yeah.
activation or, you know, whatever.
Part of the thing too, and maybe this does fit into the practice thing a little bit, but it also fits into what we're talking about. For me, and actually Ryan used to tell me this all the time, and it finally sunk in, and he's absolutely right, is that understand like you're going to lose units. Like this is a game where you're going to lose units for the most part. Like unless you like just really like have hero. You tell me
debatable.
you're never gonna lose a squad? Okay,
Ma-
I call BS on that. But like
Maybe.
most games you're gonna lose somebody. Somebody's gonna die.
I've lost games without losing any units, and I've
Well, I've done that
won.
too, but it's because old rules. But yeah, but yes. Point being, for most games,
Yeah, you're
You're
probably
gonna
gonna
lose.
lose some units. Yeah,
Yeah, you're
and
gonna have
it's
some bad
okay.
rolls. It's gonna
Yeah.
happen. Not everyone's gonna make it to the end of the game, and that's okay. But you got to figure out how to come back from
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Well, I mean, sometimes you gotta, that's part of the plan. right?
Sure.
Like I
Oh,
don't.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you're gonna shoot at him.
Yeah.
Waste all your shots on that unit. I'm gonna lose that unit, but I'm gonna grab that objective. So
That
but
was my first game at Gen Con. I threw a unit out there. He ran into melee with a dewback. I said, "Thank you, sir," and he killed them. And I said, "Thank you again, because now you're open." And then I killed the dewback. Like,
Yeah.
all right, have a nice day.
but yeah, there. That's my thoughts.
Well said.
I'm running
Well
out of
said.
steam.
Nicely done.
Yes, you
No,
got it.
I get you.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
think we did good. We got practice. We talked about good and bad feelings. Next time you visit the
Talked about our
neighborhood.
feelings.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a good
all right.
discussion about feelings.
That's right.
I tried this once on one of our videos.
Talk about your feelings once.
Yeah, I've only tried
it
this once, and I'll never do it
It's
again.
awful.
No. I tried this once and it didn't go as well as I wanted it to, but I would love for us to have like 5-minute puppet shows on like every episode of every podcast where we just like talk about something in Legion, but like to a child. Like I think that would be pretty
I can
amazing.
get my kids on it. I'm sure they'd love to.
That's right. There you go.
And Daddy says that he's never lost a unit. The Tim puppet's just crying, and he's only got one unit left.
Could make some pretty good sock puppets,
Yeah.
I bet.
That's right. Yeah.
King of Legions never lost a unit.
Yeah, we'll get a little crown for your sock puppet.
Yeah.
Oh.
You're just
All right.
what was the cat from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Daniel. He was always sad.
Daniel Tiger.
Yeah, Daniel
Oh,
Tiger.
gosh,
Yeah.
wow.
You're
Woo.
like Daniel Tiger.
Wow.
He has his own show now. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's
I think it's bullshit because Mr. Rogers isn't around anymore. But all right, if we're just
What?
taking things and doing what we want with them.
Yeah, that's fair. It continues the theme, sort of.
Yeah, well, it's never going to be the same.
No,
Mr.
yeah, of
Rogers
course
was,
not.
was an angel.
Yep. He's awesome. The shows still hold up too. Like if you go back and watch them, like my kids
yeah.
are like just totally captivated. It's
Yeah,
like-
of course they were, because he was a genius.
yeah.
anytime I go into my house and change my shoes, I think of Mr. Rogers. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
put on my house shoes. Here we go.
Yep.
It's one of the reasons I wear cardigans.
There you go.
That's fair.
Yeah.
You look good in a cardigan though. You can pull it off.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome, bud.
Things I did not expect to talk about today. Mr. Rogers. Daniel Tiger.
Practice your cardigan. Practice
Sock puppets.
your tournament fashion and sock puppets.
What if you just brought sock puppets to a Legion tournament and like did your talking through the sock puppets?
And moved your pieces
Yeah.
with them.
Have him roll dice. Bah! Like he spits out the dice.
I mean, I think some people would like it, and some people would not like it.
That's
So-
not in the tournament.
Some
doc,
people would think
so-
it was really
Ooh.
funny. Some
Yeah.
people would be like extremely put off by it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'd be a real 50-50.
It would be, yep.
Yeah.
Be very polarizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, can I say one more thing really quick, real funny? So
yes?
I ended up I won a store championship, and with
Mhm.
it, you get the cards, a bunch of cool cards, and you get 3 of the new red dice. So I don't know if that's for everybody, but that's what I got. I got 3 of the new like marbled red dice. So I had
Very
them
nice.
sitting on the table here, and I was like looking at them. And this what goes back to what I was talking about before. We're like, sure, I'm on a podcast, but I don't actually like know enough about this game sometimes. Like my head is just so like scrambled eggs. I like looking at the dice, I'm like, there's only one blank on here. That's wrong. That's gotta be wrong. Like that's gotta be a misprint. And I went over and got my other dice.
Jay, that one's
And I was
that
looking
one's
at
bad.
I was looking at them all, and I was going,
Jay,
I was like, wow, red dice are
Oh,
really
no.
good.
Oh. Yeah.
Listen. Now,
Red dice are good and water is wet.
a couple of days
Details at
later,
11.
I'm definitely like, yeah, stupid, of course. Like, but in the moment,
yeah.
I mean,
gotcha.
I was like, you ever like
gotcha.
say a word and the word just doesn't sound real, and you're like, that's not a real word, and it's like Ken. and you're like,
Yeah.
that's not
Mhm.
real. Like that is not a real word. Like your
Yeah,
brain.
you type something out and you're like, wait a minute, why isn't that squiggly red underlined? Like that doesn't look right.
Right. And it's like something like keep. And you're
Yeah.
like, this is
I
it.
sometimes when I do that and I wanted to make sure I'm good, I'll purposely like put a wrong letter in there so it corrects it to whatever is like,
Yeah.
and then it spell checks it. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
now I know I'm
Oh
good.
yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
But
Now
yeah,
I'm
that was
good.
that moment I had with those red dice where I was just like, that can't be right. Only one blank. Like, oh man, they messed up these dice. They misprinted them.
Red dice good.
Anyways,
Red
boy,
attack dice better than red defense dice.
yeah, boy,
I
if
was
I
saying,
had a
I
unit with
wasn't
all
gonna say, I
red
was like, don't
attack
get me
dice,
started on red defense dice.
Yeah.
Attack dice, yeah, but defense
Those red
dice,
defense dice have twice as many blanks on them and substantially less two less sides. So.
That's true. So true.
I just want you guys to all appreciate the world that we all live in, that Kyle and I play the same game. And like
True. True.
this is Legion. We are on the opposite spectrum of that. And
And you both have invites.
and
I
we
don't.
both boom. Yeah, buddy.
I thought you did already.
No, I've only had
That.
LSO is the only tournament I've done. I haven't had any locals that I've been able to go to yet. So they've all been at like awkward times when I'm traveling or something.
I don't keep track of your local scene, so I just figured you had a local. Sorry.
Oh man, wow.
Uh-oh.
Looks like I'm the best competitive
player
player on this podcast.
I didn't mean to open the can of worms. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I got some chances. I got Nova.
Yeah, you're good.
You know, we're gonna take it one step at a time. Nova's my next thing. So
that's funny.
True that.
But yeah, anywho.
Yep.
Do you guys think my brain is just like pudding? Like I wonder sometimes.
I have that experience sometimes.
Yeah. Just like it's just pudding up there.
I mean, I'll have moments where I walk into a room and I'll be like, why did I come in here?
Dude.
You know?
There's actually, I forget the name of it, but that is a psychological thing of when you walk through a doorway, your brain like resets a little bit. So you're not allowed to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah. I forget what it's called, but there is a term for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am like,
I'm
did you guys
getting old?
Yeah. No.
You guys ever see the movie Signs? Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Remember the kid that left waters all over? That is legitimately me. I will get a drink. Doesn't matter. Coffee, like a water, whatever. I'll be drinking it. Something will happen, whether it's just all in my brain or in real life. I set down the drink and I just go on about my day. And then like 20 minutes later, I'm like, yeah, I had a coffee. Where did that go? And then I have to like retrace my steps through.
I just pour myself another one.
Rachel gets home. There's just like waters and like
random,
it's like signs in our house. She's just, and then I also do this thing where she goes, "Hey, this is your water." I'm like, "No, it's not." And she's like, "Whose else would it be?" And I'm like, "Not mine."
It's the doorway effect.
But in my head, I really don't think that's my water.
It's called the doorway effect.
I can't wait to do all my research on this tomorrow at work. I'll let you know. I'll write a paper for you by next
I'd love
week.
to hear about how my brain is not addled just because I'm getting older.
Oh man. Anyways.
All right.
This was a good cast.
It was.
It was.
All right. How about we close it out before we get off the rails too much?
Yeah.
More. All right. We're the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Tim.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Stay cool, Fruit Mat.